Hey, it's Jaron. A word before we get started. Local media needs local support. Despite what some might think, the social networks don't care about local news and information. They don't pay us. And the podcast apps, they don't pay us either. It takes resources for this little team to make things happen. And so if you can, think about becoming a member at patreon.com/Daily Detroit. We need our members and our local supporters to keep the lights on because, look, out in this internet world, it's tough out there, and it's even tougher for local community information that honestly just doesn't go for 5 or 10 million views all the time because there's only so many people that are interested in it, our local community. So we need our local support. Patreon.com/Daily Detroit. All right, let's get into this episode celebrating a classic Detroit establishment for this Friday, January 31st, 2025. Joining us at the Daily Detroit studio at Techtown are two friends of the show to celebrate, I think, one of the greatest establishments in modern Detroit history, the Old Miami. It's 45 years that this place that I call, with love, a dog park for humans, one of the best dive bars in town, 45 years. Joining me is the manager, Dena Walker, to my left. How are you? Welcome to Daily Detroit.
I'm wonderful. How are you?
Good, good. And then to my right, a voice that you may know if you've been listening to the show for a while, author and archaeologist, Mickey Lyons. Good to see you.
Hey, Jer.
Hey, I just want to tell listeners, too, there is an old Detroit radio behind me. So thank you, Mickey. I haven't had a chance to see you in person on the air. Thank you for that radio. It is a huge addition to the studio.
Oh, well, I'm glad it's found a good home.
Of course, of course. All right, so Old Miami, how did this place come together? Because you look at it and you're like, veterans bar, and then sometimes it's like cool kids, and then sometimes it's like college students. There's so many personalities to this place. Heck, I remember my dad, who lived in the Cass Corridor, used to drink at the Old Miami.
Oh, yeah. So Danny bought the building after working in the railroad and being a Vietnam veteran. And then it was a burnt out building at the time. It was called the New Miami for a while. Somebody firebombed it. And he spent many years kind of piecing it together. But him and Julie have always just wanted to make sure that people have a place where they feel safe and welcomed in the Cass Corridor. And I feel like that's why the vibe there is just so many different people come in, artists and musicians and veterans. And I mean, literally everybody comes in.
I think pieced together is a great way to describe it because it's kind of a collage of Detroit history.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And you can see the kind of history that has evolved in the 45 years that they've had it,
Yes.
That's a great thing about the homegrown bars is, they bring everything in as they acquire it. And I get the impression that Danny and Julie are kind of like little magpies of Detroit history. Shiny, this deserves to be in the backyard.
Yeah, and that wall behind the bar of all that, we still get people that bring in, patches, pins, or brought their pin and patch 20 years ago and want to know where it is on the bar, and we look for it.
That's cool.
We don't take any of that down.
So Miami stands for something, right?
Missing in Action, Michigan.
Okay. And how is it like blending all of these things together? Because it's so often in Detroit, it's like, well, what's the vibe? And is it this group or that group? But it's all the groups in so many ways. How does that come together?
Right. We're definitely I hear a lot people, visiting or coming back to Detroit, like they get off the plane and we are their first stop in the city because they're the place that they miss or they've heard about or whatever. And I just think it's that working so hard to make everyone feel welcome that walks in the door. There's no we welcome sports fans. We welcome, every type of music. We try to book different stuff.
Yeah, it reminds me of a lot of ways the spirit of New Orleans, where it's like everyone's welcome and be nice or leave.
Yeah. Yeah. We do have a sign that says that in the bar. So,
Mickey, you have done so many articles and research into Detroit bar history. What do you think helps set Old Miami apart for it to have this longevity of 45 years?
I think a lot of it is what Dena was talking about, the welcoming spirit, the zero judgment, to be able to survive in the Cass corridor, now wherever we're calling it, to be able to survive, to open up, to survive, to thrive is, it takes a certain fortitude and it takes a certain tolerance that I think still shows up in the spirit of the old Miami with whoever's there, whoever's welcoming.
When it comes to running the bar, what are some of the things that you've learned in the last few years? Because you didn't come with the bar. You were not born at the bar.
I'm not even from Detroit.
Yeah. But you've definitely found a home here.
Yes.
And you live in the city as well.
Yes.
And so what about it has like that you've learned and grown for yourself through this journey?
Right. Well, I've bartended in 7 countries and many states, and the old Miami is special. Like it definitely was my first stop in Detroit. You walk in, it's a cool dive bar when you go inside because you can really feel all the history that you can feel the 45 years when you walk in. But when you go in the backyard, you're just not expecting that green space back there. And then that also has a very like cultivated, homey, I guess nothing there feels like pretentious.
Nothing
at all.
Whatsoever.
Not one thing.
Right.
I mean, I think about the little waterfall fountain in the back, or the homage to Detroit sports teams, or the back patio porch that ends up being an impromptu stage at times. And that kind of green space is so important in a city fabric, I think.
I think so too. I love the dog park for humans because it's very fitting.
How have you been able to keep so accessible on things like pricing over the years? Because one of the things that everyone loves about Old Miami is that you can access this dog park for humans, but it doesn't cost you. You're not gonna, you don't have to spend $50 on the fanciest cocktail. You can go in there and get a gin and a tonic, a Jack and Coke, or whatever, and just go enjoy the thing. And the pricing alone helps make it feel accessible.
I think because we've kind of stayed an and bar, we didn't like buy into the cocktail revolution or all that happened. It's like Jack and Coke, vodka and soda. Like it's just
beer and shot.
Yes. Beer and whiskey. Yeah.
I'm so curious. So at a bar like this, what are like the kind of like top sellers? What do most people go for?
Black Label and a shot of Four Roses. It used to be Jim Beam, but Four Roses has taken over.
Really?
If the old Miami had a drink or a cocktail, it would be a Carling's Black Label beer for $2 and a shot of Four Roses.
Wow.
So
the cocktail revolution has hit just a little bit.
Yeah.
We've moved on up to Four Roses. Yeah. We're getting sophisticated in our tastes.
So for people who don't know, why don't you kind of like deploy that out for people a little bit in like the hierarchy?
Oh, in the hierarchy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. It depends like what the real shot is, what the cool shot is. Four Roses is just, everyone accepts that it's sort of a well-designed bourbon, and but it's not overly pricey or pretentious. I mean, that can be,
I think it's the best low-cost bourbon there is out there.
Yep. Yeah. They used to call it just Yellow Label, but now it's Four Roses.
Their single barrel is excellent. We don't carry it, but if you ever want to show up somewhere with a $20 bottle that's impressive, their single barrel's worth it.
What is it with numbers and booze? Because I remember the old like rye whiskey. When I read old books, it was 3 feathers for newspapermen in Detroit.
I have never heard this.
3 feathers was the jam at the Detroit Times and other places.
Stumped me on a booze and history question. I'm embarrassed. Wow. Okay.
I heard of that either.
Yeah.
Was that
I don't
the
think it
brand
exists anymore? Yeah, it was just a brand.
Oh, I thought it was the pour, like 3 fingers.
Oh, ooh, that's interesting. Detroit's been going through a lot of changes the last few years. How has Old Miami kind of both embraced and also stayed to its roots?
Well, I feel like it's because Dan and Julie still own the bar and have owned it for such a long time that they're still involved in a lot of the everyday decisions. So it's their dream. All they wanted to do was just have a place where people felt comfortable, and bands got to play, and people got starts and opportunities and things like that. And we just like constantly stick with that, I guess, basically mission statement from the beginning.
That might say North Star in the corporate world. There's been a lot of history in that area too.
Yeah, there has. I remember I interviewed Dan a few years ago, and the stories that he was telling, some of them most definitely cannot be repeated on the radio. That's for sure.
They're really fun.
But he said he basically, when it came in, because he was from the area, he knew what he was getting into when he bought the space. So he came in and he told the people running drugs and prostitution rings, you can have the whole rest of the neighborhood. This block from here to here is mine. You stay out of my business, I'll stay out of your business. And everyone just kind of respected that, and that was that. So, he's kept that integrity to the bar, while being old school Detroit and holding firm with, you don't cross a line, and there is a definite line.
He is definitely a very tough man, especially back in the day, because he was in the railroad union. So he was a union fighter. And then he was in all of that with Rodriguez, like before all of this started. He's an artist himself. He's actually having his first show coming up in May, but it's going to be in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
But he's like an incredible folk artist. So I think he's done all these kind of like tough things, like be in the Vietnam War and be a union leader for the railroad and run a bar in what was determined to be Detroit Skid Row for a while.
It's like Detroit Grit before the Lions.
Right.
And Dan Campbell and all that other stuff. That story of Sixto Rodriguez is really fascinating. It feels like he's at the old Miami the whole time, If people don't know, there's a great movie about how this artist from Detroit became big. I think it was South Africa.
South Africa.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And completely unknown here.
You would not believe the amount of people, especially right before he passed, that come into the bar just expecting him to be sitting at the bar.
Wow.
I was like, he's a little old for that right now.
He doesn't actually live here.
Yeah. He doesn't. You don't just like keep him in a storeroom.
Yeah. Just bring him out.
What is part of the allure?
I was in there last Monday.
Yep.
Recently, I stopped in, and just in the, don't judge, it's my job. It was 4:00 on a Monday afternoon. And just in the time that I was there, we had a group of what seemed very obviously to me tourists who had read about it or heard about it somewhere and came in and were just like looking around, taking pictures in the corners, taking pictures of the Rodriguez sign. We had a couple of regulars who really kind of did seem like they lived there and probably went to sleep in a closet. And we had just this wide group of folks who just roll in and out and sort of make it their own.
If somebody is hearing this and they haven't been to Old Miami before, what are your first timer tips? First time you say, okay, I'm going to go to this place over on Cass. I'm going to check it out. I've never been. First timer tips.
Go in the backyard. That's what we tell everyone. Because people think that it's just the inside. And then I'm like, the backyard's like 8 times bigger. And make it all the way to the koi pond. So you get like a good feeling for it. Be ready to talk to somebody you probably wouldn't normally talk to or have never talked to before. Some people are like, oh, I show up and I never know if I'm going to talk to the hottest girl I've ever seen or some guy that just got out of jail. So it's literally everyone.
That is fantastic. I couldn't think of any better way to describe the first time at the Old Miami.
There are a bunch of things happening this year for the 45th. You've got all kinds of shows coming up, but there is something right on the horizon, like right away.
Yes. On Saturday, we are having the party, which is going to be from 3 to 10 p.m. We're going to have a luge festival in the backyard. It's going to be a little bit more on the patio because the weather didn't hold with us for the backyard not being a little wet. But we'll have, it's $20 to get in. All of the proceeds are going to Little Blessings, which is a ranch that provides horse therapy to veterans. It's one of 3 charities, I think, in the U.S. that do 52 weeks of therapy for veterans and their children and their spouses. And then for the $20, you can go out and sample about 7 to 8 luges.
So luge is not like get on a sled and go down the hill.
I'm thinking about like Jamaican Bobcat
7
team.
or 8 different ice
shot
luges.
luges.
Oh my God. What are they going to pour in them? 4 roses?
No, it's going to be Jameson, Crown, Absolute, Bacardi. And then you will not be putting your mouth on the luge. They are going into a cup that, and then there'll also be a Kahlua coffee bar with that. We're going to have some coffee and tea to warm people up because even though it's warm today, I think it might be cold on Saturday. And then we're going to have some bands play as we normally do on Saturday night. Probably take a picture in front of the bar again.
Pretty epic to have that group photo. Well, go check out the Old Miami on Saturday. And of course, throughout the year, I will fully admit that I am somebody who will frequent this establishment because frankly, it's a lot of fun. It's somewhere you can kind of decompress in the city of Detroit. So Dena Walker and Mickey Lyons, thank you so much for your time on Daily Detroit. I really appreciate you both.
Thank you.